Um, one sort of striking thing about these TEDx talks is that when they invite you to speak, they ask you, right in the talk guidelines that they send, to make yourself vulnerable. They ask you to to sort of reveal something about yourself, something that might touch another person. And that is, after all, what great conversation is, right? So here's what I'm going to reveal. Even though I have always prided myself on being a very practical person, very grounded in reality and analysis and politics, I have come to think in the work that I do as the director of an international women's rights organization, and really I think in any work for social change, that there's something more powerful than analysis and politics in this work of social change. And that's the power of the imagination. In fact, I think now that that might be the greatest power that we have as human beings, our ability to envision what's not there, maybe what's never been there before. Because it's only once we can really imagine the world as we want it to be that we can be effective using our faculties of analysis, of critical thinking, our skills of political organizing, to make that world come true. So those remain vital tools, right? It's our intellectual understanding, our interpretation of the world that guides our strategies and our alliances, the steps that we lay out for ourselves in the process of realizing our vision. And we have to have clarity about those steps. Otherwise, you can have your beautiful vision, right, your future utopia in mind. For me, that would be a world in which everybody's basic needs are met, people have the care and the respect they need to really flourish, the environment is protected, we live at peace. But whatever your version is, whatever your future utopia is, you have to have those strategic steps, that roadmap for getting there. So the work is grounded, right? It's not dreamy and fanciful, but still I kind of feel like I have to defend the idea that there's something, that the imagination is somehow more powerful than, say, policy analysis in creating social change. And why is that? Why would it be so much easier to stand here and talk to you about the global financial crisis or US foreign policy or some other topic that would feel less personal? It's a fear, I think, of sounding irrational or idealistic. And it's a reflection of the way we have sort of left the imagination to the poets and the artists and tried to get on with this hard, serious work of fixing the world with tools created by policymakers, by political scientists. We make the mistake of thinking that imagination is the opposite of reality, instead of understanding that imagination is the key to creating a better social reality. And that is more true now than at any other point in our history. Young people in particular have to be highly skilled in imagining not just a better world, but one we've never had before. Because the world that we have built has kind of brought us to a dead end. And if you're in college now, I don't have to tell you that the kinds of jobs that your parents had, the kinds of lives that your parents are leading, are probably not going to be available to you. You're going to have to make it up as you go along. Because already, chances are that whatever your work is going to be, your job 15 years from now, even 10 years from now, chances are it doesn't exist yet. That's where we are. And that's true not just about the job market and the economy, everything. From the way that we grow our food, to how we power our cars, to how we raise our children and resolve international conflicts, needs to look different than it ever has before. And it is dramatic, but not an exaggeration, to say that the life of the planet as we know it is in the balance. Now, to even begin to imagine this new world that we need, this great world that you want to live in, you have to be able to believe that the world that you see in front of you doesn't have to be this way. And that's hard, because we're so trained to think that reality is fixed, that whatever is needs to be, that the status quo is somehow justified or necessary. And mostly, it's a message that we hear from people who are benefiting from the ways that things are, right? There is no alternative. We keep hearing about economic austerity, for example. But we believe that. And when we internalize that message, we impoverish our own imaginations. We set limits on possibilities so that the status quo becomes that much more entrenched. But every once in a while, something will happen to disrupt that passive thinking, that unexamined assumption that whatever is needs to be, that there is no alternative. And I think we've all had those moments of dissonance, you know, that sudden deep knowledge that, oh, this could be very different. And the question is, what do you do with those moments? Do you disregard them and let reality sort of close back over that fissure of possibility? Or do you cultivate those moments until you are living in the possibility of how the world could be? Think about it. What have been your moments of possibility? And did you shrink away because they're really uncomfortable? Or did you explore? I'll tell you about my moment of possibility. When I was a child, we lived in Israel, and sometimes we would go visit relatives up north along the Syrian border. And every once in a while at night, a siren would go off, and I'd have to find my stuffed animal and grab my father's hand and go down with everybody into the bomb shelters. Now, you were supposed to go back to sleep down there, and they had little cots set up, but it was always really cold, and the adults were always really nervous and smoking. And one of those nights, as my father was sort of desperately trying to get me to go back to sleep, and I was complaining that I was scared and I couldn't sleep, he said to me, "Picture a little girl just across the border in Syria who's also in her bed and afraid of the noises, and wish her sweet dreams. That will help you fall asleep, and that will make peace come faster." And I remember that feeling of dissonance, that deep confusion at the idea that there could be a little girl in Syria. Because everything that I had ever heard left me to understand that there were no children there. Now, of course, I have my analysis, right? I have my critique of the ways that children absorb dehumanizing stereotypes and how those stereotypes perpetuate conflict. But back then, all I had was this strange new image of a little girl with a long braid like mine in her bed in Syria. And so I did what little girls do. I made her my imaginary friend. And I gave her the most beautiful name that I could think of, which was Barbie. Yeah, we're not going to deconstruct that here. That's like a whole other talk. But I will say that that moment of possibility remains very much at the center of my political imagination today, my sense of possibility now, right? The idea that I could be part of bringing peace, that I could make a friend where I was told to see enemies, the idea that I could quiet my own fear by reaching out to someone else who's also afraid and helping her, and the understanding that when I offer that help, that's not charity, that's self-preservation. All of those ideas operate in the work that I do now in social change. Now, I don't talk to Barbie anymore, but I am going in 2 weeks to a refugee camp where thousands of Syrian families have fled from the civil war that's destroying their country right now. And someone said to me recently, "Oh, how can you work in places like that? Isn't that so depressing?" And I want to tell you that it's not depressing. Depressing would be sitting at home, feeling helpless, watching this war rage on from my couch. I'm not overwhelmed by the sadness, very grave sadness, that we do encounter in the places where we work, because we're actively engaged in healing that sadness. Remember, the best way to stop feeling helpless is to help someone. And I'm not overwhelmed because we are working with the bravest people in the world. The women that we work with have survived wars and natural disasters in Syria, in Haiti, in Iraq, in Kenya and Sudan, in Nicaragua and Guatemala. These women are survivors in every sense of that word. They've lived through the worst, and they're still standing. And they're not just standing, they're dancing and they're singing because they know that to give in to despair even just a little bit would be the end. They're just too close to the brink. They don't have that luxury. And so they imagine something bigger, something better, and then they work as if their lives depended on it, together with us, to make what they imagine come true. We work with women who were raped, whose daughters were raped, and they can still imagine a world without that violence. We work with mothers who buried every single one of their children in the famine in Somalia, and they can still imagine a world where no child goes hungry. We work with women who were never allowed to go to school, and they can easily imagine a world in which every single child has access to education. And it's a testament to the power of the imagination, a power we all have, that these women, despite everything that life has shown them, can get out of bed in the morning and say, we're going to build a better world. We're going to build a just world. Now, we don't live in that world yet. But thanks to the power of the imagination, it is on its way. Think about the progress just in the United States, just in the past 50 years, for civil rights, for women's rights, for marriage equality. Think about Latin America, where social movements have reclaimed whole countries. Think about the unfinished revolutions, the Arab Springs in the Middle East and North Africa. Wherever we see people coming together to create change, it's really easy to forget a simple fact. Somebody, somewhere, had to imagine it first, right? Somebody had to stand up and say, this is wrong, but here's what I can imagine. That's what makes a movement, enough people spurred by their imagination coming together to take action. And we each have it in us, this power to imagine a better world and make it real. Think about it. How can you imagine a better world? See? Starting already. Thank you.